Welcome back to our third stretch of notes. We can look at that side, the last six systems that we find in our body. So number 6 is the cardiovascular system. Now you may have this written down on your paper as another name. You might have it as a circulatory system. And that's okay, that's what we used to call this. However, we find that a better term for it is the cardiovascular system. When we talk about the cardiovascular system, we're looking at the blood, the heart, and the blood vessels, the veins, arteries, and capillaries. The functions of the cardiovascular system, if we're talking about the heart's responsible for pumping blood throughout the blood vessels. And so when our body does this, our blood carries oxygen and nutrients to the cells to get them what they need. And then it's going to take carbon dioxide and waste away from the cells so we can get those things out of the body. And to do that, we're going to use other systems like the respiratory system with the carbon dioxide, and then other wastes can exit with our urinary system, and that's coming up soon. Also, it's going to help regulate acidity. If you've been in chemistry before, when we talk about pH, once again, that's something where our body needs to maintain homeostasis. So if we have too much or too little acidity, this system can make adjustments with that. Our cardiovascular system is also responsible for helping us to regulate our temperature. So when we talked about our skin trying to keep us warm, our cardiovascular system can also do that. What happens when you are in a situation where you're cold for too long of a period of time, your body will shut off circulation to, especially, starting with your extremities. So fingers and toes might not be receiving a blood supply. And of course, that can have an impact on your body because you might have to, have some parts, fingers or toes removed because of that. Our body is also, when we talk about the cardiovascular system, it's also going to help with the water content of body fluids. So you may have heard before that, a big percentage of our body is made up of water, around 60%. And so we want to make sure, again, we're maintaining that homeostasis and have the appropriate water content. Finally, blood components are also going to help defend against disease. So when we look at those white blood cells that go and basically fight off the bad bacteria and viruses within our bodies. And then also we have blood components known as platelets that help mend the damaged blood vessels. So platelets can clot to help seal up and close up wounds so that we can heal. Kind of cool stuff. So taking a look at that picture, you'll see a lot in red and blue, and we'll talk about this a lot more next semester when we get into the cardiovascular system. But blood is really never blue within our body, it's always red. The reason that we designated it being blue at some points is just that's how in our mind we can keep track of whether it has oxygen or not. And when it's deoxygenated, or meaning without oxygen, that's when we color it as being blue, even though it's always going to be red within our body. So just something to keep in mind. And arteries are the structures, that carry blood away from our heart. Artery starts with A. Veins carry blood towards the heart. So that's how those structures work. Number 7 is the lymphatic system, and this might have been another one that you have missed. Or you may have had a different name. It can also go by the immune system. So those words are interchangeable. The components of the lymphatic system are the lymphatic fluid and vessels. And when we look at organs, we're looking at structures like the spleen, the thymus, our lymph nodes and tonsils, and then also particular cells that we have that carry out immune responses. And the functions of the lymphatic system, if you think of immune system, that might give you more of a hint. But this system is responsible for returning proteins and fluid to the blood. It also carries lipids or fats from the gastrointestinal tract within our digestive system to our bloodstream. And then it contains sites of maturation and proliferation of those B cells and T cells that protect against disease-causing microbes. So it's kind of like they are little police officers within our body, making sure that things that are not supposed to be there are not, and they get rid of them to help keep us safe. So looking at the picture, you can see that the lymphatic system, they kind of have it colored in green there, but you can see the picture, and the picture included is your tonsils. I don't know if any of you have had a tonsillectomy or had your tonsils removed, but a lot of times that is dealing with your lymphatic system. If you have a lot of infections, that is something that they could do. You maybe have also gone into the doctor when you don't feel well, and the doctors will put their fingers along your throat and feel that area. And that's what they're kind of doing, is looking for swollen lymph nodes or tonsils to signify that your body has an infection that it's fighting off. So that's what this picture is showing. And then you can see, of course, the lymph nodes and the lymphatic vessels. That's what those green stringy structures that are flowing throughout the body there. So system number 8 is the respiratory system. And usually this is one that students remember to write down, because when we think about our body being able to do what it needs to, we're going to, of course, need to be able to inhale and exhale. So when we look at the specifics with that, we're looking at the organs such as our lungs and our air passageways, like the pharynx within our throat, our larynx, our voice box, or our trachea, our windpipe. And then also we have those bronchial tubes that lead into and out of those structures. And those bronchial tubes also branch off into more specific structures, but we won't worry about the specific names of those structures right now. But the functions of the respiratory system are to transfer oxygen from our inhaled air to our blood, and then also take the carbon dioxide from our blood to the exhaled air. So we have to get rid of it. And it also helps regulate the acidity of body fluids, and also air flowing out of the lungs through our vocal cords is what allows us to make noise. So fortunately, we have the capacity to be able to do that, but that's all because of our respiratory system. So my 4-year-old son Sawyer is almost as enthusiastic about the body as I am. And one of his favorite books is a really cool lift tab book that shows all the specifics with the body. And one of his favorite pages is the pages dealing with the lungs. And he just loves to practice and show how our rib cage can expand when we breathe in, and then how it moves back in when we breathe out. So kind of cool how that works, and why we need that oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. So thanks, respiratory system. When we look at those structures again, like you can see in the picture, so we're looking at basically the top half of our body, but we need the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the lungs, and then the bronchi within the lungs to be able to get what we need with that air coming in and carbon dioxide going out. Number 9 is the digestive system. And this is always fun to talk about. What happens to that food after we eat it? This is another one of Sawyer's favorite pages. And when we look, of course, there's several organs involved within that GI or gastrointestinal tract. We're going to start with our mouth because, of course, we're going to have to produce saliva and chew up our food to help start breaking it down. Then we're going to swallow our food, so it's going to go down our throat and not in the windpipe. That's when you choke, that's what happens. But it's going to go down what my son calls our food pipe, your esophagus. And the esophagus is the tube that connects your throat to your stomach, and then goes into the stomach to get broken down some more with acid inside of there, and then through the small and large intestines. And that's where the small intestines is what absorbs those other nutrients that our food needs. And then the large intestines take that excess waste and get rid of it, and it's going to leave our body through the rectum and the anus. And then we also have some what we call accessory digestive organs that also help with breaking down the food, like our salivary glands, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So of course, many different structures involved. so that we can get the nutrients needed to help our body function. And with functioning, it says it achieves physical and chemical breakdown of food, absorbs nutrients, and eliminates solid waste. So when we think about energy to be able to function throughout the day, of course, we're going to have to feed our body, give our body fuel. So we're not going to have take gas, but we're going to use food to be able to do that. And some food, yes, might cause gas, but you know what I'm saying there. So with the digestive system, here's a lovely picture. And if you remember that little girl a few slides ago, she had digestive organs, put onto her body too. But yeah, many different structures, and a lot of these are, in our abdominal pelvic cavity is what we call the area below our chest, above our legs. That's where a lot of these organs are found, dealing with digestion. So system number 10, speaking of waste, is the urinary system. So when we zoom in and take a look at the urinary system, this involves two kidneys. We have one on the left and one on the right, usually. Ureters are the tubes that connect the kidneys to the bladder. And you can see here it's called urinary bladder, but we usually just call it bladder. And then also the urethra, which is the tube that allows urine to exit our body. And so everybody, no matter what your gender, has all of these structures, but the urethra is going to be longer in males because having, different structures involved. So when we look at the urinary system, this is the system that's responsible for producing, storing, and eliminating urine. So that's a lot to do, right? And so when we look at that, why is it that our body makes urine? Well, this is how we're able to eliminate waste and then also regulate the volume and chemical composition of blood. So when we have too much of something, we can get rid of that through our urine. And maybe you're aware of this, but there are lots of different tests that can be done to see what your body is getting rid of. And that helps doctors, for example, figure out what's wrong if you're not feeling well. That could be a good way for them to check and see what's not normal as far as those numbers go. Looking at the urinary system, it also helps regulate the acidity of body fluids. We've heard this with a few other systems as well, but it also helps with that. It can also help maintain our body's mineral balance, as well as help regulating that red blood cell production. So when we don't have enough, it can do things to make that happen. So this picture dealing with our urinary system, you can see similar areas as or body regions where we found the digestive system. But when we look at the urinary system, it's also going to be in the abdominal pelvic cavity. And you can see there the two kidneys. And one thing that's kind of hard to tell in these pictures, but there is a big blood supply going to the kidneys and leaving from the kidneys because, like we said, that's in charge of basically filtering our blood and getting rid of waste or the things that we don't need, and we can pee it out. And our bladder is really cool, and we'll talk about it as we progress throughout the semester. But we learn that the bladder is made up of a special type of tissue, which basically makes it kind of like a balloon, so it can stretch and get bigger. And then when we use the bathroom, it's going to shrink back down to its normal size until it gets filled up again. So it's really kind of cool how that works. And it also is interesting what happens with pregnant women when there's a baby and not enough room for that to be able to expand. And we'll get to talk about that as well too. So there's the urinary system, which brings us to our very last system, which is the reproductive system. So when we take a look, this is made up of the gonads, the testes or the ovaries, and the associated organs. So you can see several structures listed. Go ahead and pause and fill in this information now. And if you look at the functions, these are the structures that are responsible for producing the gametes, which basically means sperm cells or egg cells, which allows us to be able to create a new human being. So it's kind of cool how that works. And here's the picture of the reproductive system. Thanks, guys.